So thank you all for joining. I know it's been a really fantastic event starting last night, so thanks again for all the facilities last night and the sessions this morning. So I'm Steve Kramer. I'm Chief Scientist at a company called Kungfu.ai. We're a small AI machine learning consultancy, and obviously, as you know, with how things are gone, I was giving a talk a couple weeks ago for the Austin Forum on Technology and Society, trying to catch up, and literally I would have to stop looking at Twitter because 11 o'clock the night before the talk, I was like, stop trying to add more stuff because things are evolving so quickly. And that even happened last night. So we'll talk to more about how we get into, I'm sure we'll be mentioning LLMs and so forth even more during this conversation, but definitely wanted to take a moment. So it's great to get to have this conversation with you, Dmitry. I think you could take some time now to give us a little bit about your personal background, the technology space, what led you to your current venture, and then we'll have just a really kind of open, flowing conversation, and then plenty of time for questions. I know we're going to be shortening the session a little bit, as I understand, so we'll get right to questions when there's a good moment. But yeah, over to you, Dmitry.
Okay, thanks so much. Happy to be here. I'm a nerd. I was born in Russia, moved to Atlanta, Georgia when I was 9 years old in 1979. I was an outcast. My mom was way overprotective, so I sort of got to stay home all the time. Fortunately, I was able to get an Apple IIc computer, and that's what I spent my time doing. I was one of only two guys in my school that were into computers. This is the time before bookstores had computer sections. And so I checked out one book out of our library, never returned it. All I remember about it is it was about basic, it had 186 pages, and I kind of knew where everything was just by feel. And somehow I lost that book and no longer have it. Studied electrical engineering at Georgia Tech, graduated, was a terrible student, never did a day of electrical engineering, always done software. After college, went and did a number of jobs, and then got a job at Fujitsu. From 95 to 99, I built the web team at Fujitsu. Then went and joined a company called collegeclub.com as head of product just for a year, and then left to build my first company, which was called Iconic Systems, which started off as one thing but ended up pivoting into cybersecurity. Raised $34 million for that and built that over a 5-year period of time. Replaced myself as CEO with a more experienced CEO, and left to start another company called VO Networks, which was a competitor to YouTube. It was a major one. I raised $70 million for that, 70. I did that for 5 years, and then left. We actually got sued out of existence and were forced to sell the company in a fire sale. It's a famous story. You can Google it. Went to MySpace and became CTO of MySpace Music for a moment, for a year, and then was recruited up into the machine into Google. And then I spent 4.25 years to the day at Google. And then left in 2016, and as I was leaving, not exactly sure how we connected, and I told you I was leaving.
You posted on Facebook, thank you to all my friends at Google, and there wasn't an English name all the way down the whole, I could pronounce it.
There's a lot of people on that list.
And I said, Dmitry, we want to invest in whatever you're doing next. You disappeared for a week or two, and finally called me because you had been at Burning Man.
Yes. No, probably. Yes, I'm also a big burner. I've been to Burning Man 11 years. My wife has been 10 years. All of my kids were planned around Burning Man, so it's the biggest belly in the burn, except for the twins now. So I actually now have 5 kids: 9-year-old, 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and almost 1-year-old twins. And so they were not planned around the burn. Anyway, and so and started this company. Moonshots was the first money into it. In our first convertible note, and by the way, I just recorded a little video for you guys, so I'm not going to use our time here to express kind of how you guys operate and what I think of the of the fund. I've now raised over $140 million just to complete this section. In venture capital for these various companies, I have a fairly large network of VCs, angels, wealthy friends, and get asked to participate in as a limited partner in venture funds. I'm only limited partner in one venture fund, and that's Moonshots Capital.
Okay, that's great. So I'm sure we'd love to hear more about the current venture that you were talking to us about earlier this week.
Yeah, I'm going to skip how we got here because of time, because I think this thing is much more interesting for us to talk about. Just as, again, another quick background, I started working with ML teams, machine learning teams in 2012 when I joined Google. I was responsible for three things there: calculating a ranked list of people you may know, so that you would explicitly be able to add them to your circles. This was when Google Plus was a thing, and Google was trying to do that. Calculating a second ranked list of people you may like, people you didn't know, but potentially should know. And then sort of influencing the ranking of the Google Plus feed, what posts should go into the feed, because there are typically many posts, and how do you calculate what should go in there? And since then, obviously been watching the space evolve. At VO, we built the first video recommendations engine before YouTube launched recommendations. A guy named Dr. Dmitry, who was my chief scientist there. We realized we had in common, so we've been paying attention to the space for a very long time. We are now, I believe, entering a massive new inflection point of how we, humans, engage with information technology, right? We went from, you wanted to get some information. If you were rich, you had a set of encyclopedias, or if you were like me, you had to go to the library and learn this damned Dewey Decimal System, which I never really took the time to learn. And maybe there was a librarian that would get you to the book that you wanted to read an excerpt in. And then, humans, used their creative power and generated all of this content for the web. And then, Google showed up and organized it and ranked it. And for the last 2 decades, we've been living in this amazing world that, like, any question we have can be answered, from our pockets or from our watch. That's incredible. Wow, 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 wow. I'm certain that we are now entering another phase, which is a step function, much more powerful than the delta between the Dewey Decimal System and Google. And this is this ability to be able to engage with information technology that understands the world in the form of concepts rather than web pages of stuff, right? Google's answer to you when you say, I want this, is here are 41 million places you could go to. I've ranked them for you, and you can read about it there. But these large language models, or sort of any generative AI, why is it generative? Because it understands atomic units and can put them together. This is why it can summarize. This is why it can create things, because it understands concepts and therefore can make those create. So this is an incredible new capability we've never ever had. But our interface to be able to wield it is what? Is DOS? Is a little text box that says type anything you want? Engage with me, this information technology. I can do anything you want me to do, just say it in words. Well, that's hard. How many words would you have to say to tell this thing to do what you want to do? If it's just like, give me a picture of a donkey and a cat playing guitar, it can give you a bunch of pictures of a donkey and a cat playing guitar, and that's a well-fulfilled query. But if you've got more nuance, well, that would require many, many words. So saying a picture says 1,000 words. But even that, you might need to prompt much more than that. So anyways, this is the area that we're focused on. It's called YouAi, Y-O-U-A-I. And it's an app. It's a feed. we all know and love feeds, that you, human, engage with. And as you engage with this feed, it teases out of your mind sort of various things that are in your mind. Beliefs, preferences, biases, all of those things that bounce around in our minds. It teases that out of you and creates a data set, digitizes it. In other words, we're going to say digitizes your mind. And when we digitize things, well, the dynamics of digital are obviously radically different. We can use graph analysis to cluster things and detect anomalies, and neural networks today are able to take all of this data that's unlabeled and be able to tease out of it statistically meaningful features. And so this is, we think, the next frontier for us to be able to leverage all of this innovation. And as you were introducing this, you're saying how quickly things are evolving. Biologically, we are precluded from being able to evolve as rapidly to be able to leverage all of this innovation that's happening. And so the only way that I believe that we can leverage all of this innovation is to create a data set of ourselves. Now, we're obviously constantly changing, so this is an ongoing thing. This is a relationship you have with this app that's constantly querying you and you responding to it. And then it, as your proxy, is the thing that engages with all of these technologies. You're basically creating, in a sense, a digital carbon copy of yourself. And that digital carbon copy, because it is digital, is on 24/7, is AI-driven, can engage with this constantly changing world, and basically be your chief of staff. Really understanding you and making your life better at every dimension.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. And for those of you who listen, we did have a conversation earlier with the other panelists who was supposed to join us, Ali Goshar is the CEO and founder of Gretel.ai. So really interesting, just to give a super quick summary from my understanding. He said Gretel's really focused on two key aspects of differential privacy and the ability to create synthetic data sets to use to train downstream models. Something which is something I'm very excited about, both of those things, because in many cases, in the real world, we have very few real-world labeled examples. And so we've certainly found in many of our projects that if you can effectively create synthetic data to help bootstrap and create larger and more successful programs, that's great. And then also, as we know, for many of these AI systems, the whole aspect of privacy and protection, how do you get the performance that you need out of AI systems without compromising personal information. And so I was kind of curious about, because obviously what you're talking about here is sharing potentially extremely personal information. So I'm kind of curious about what your thoughts are about how you create these kind of AI systems in a responsible, ethical manner that respects privacy of individuals as well.
Yeah, very important questions. So we live in a world today where bits of our personal information is distributed through many internet endpoints. Right? We have accounts on a bunch of systems. A bunch of these systems ask us for various parts of our digital information. There's all the cookies that are used to try to track us, and yada yada. In fact, again, one of the things that was most surprising to me at Google when I was put in charge of calculating these ranked lists of people you may know, people you may like, and feed ranking, was it seems like that would be pretty easy for Google to be able to show you a list of people you may know. You may know. It doesn't say you do know, just a list of people you may know. You'd think that would be pretty easy. Yet there were these 3 machine learning teams that were having a really hard time doing that. And after a good year and a half of sort of beating my head against the wall of this, it became clear to me that even though we have a tremendous amount of data in the world out there, because it's all, so from a privacy standpoint, that's a disaster, because it's all over the place. Even if I sort of want to delete it or modify it, that's impossible to do. But from a usability standpoint, that's also terrible, because all of those implicit signals are limited in their scope and what's really available. They're ultimately ambiguous. If you use them, they're very creepy. And then, of course, regulators get involved, and so you get all of these issues. So we think the right way to do it for the future is to have an intimate relationship with a digital thing. Let's call it YouAi. And of course, you do need to share with YouAi personal information. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be information that identifies you in the physical world. We're about to launch an alpha. We only ask you for an email address and a password because you need to be able to log in somehow. But we never really need to ask you, who are you in the physical world? It's sort of the opposite of ID.me, right? Like, we don't need to know who you are. What we need to understand is, how is your mind, in a sense, to take almost like a fingerprint of your mind on an ongoing basis and be able to understand it, how to compare it to other minds, be able to understand how it relates to the world and all of that other stuff. And so we think we become the proxy, sort of the obfuscation of personal information. And then as that proxy, we can share, by the way, synthetic information with third parties in order to engage with them and not let out any real information. Obviously, unless you need to book a ticket, somebody needs to know that you are. But for all other queries, those can be ultimately obfuscated.
Right. Interesting. So, in your mind, what is the revenue at a high level? What's the revenue model
For UAI?
Yeah. If to the extent that you feel like you can share.
I mean, sitting in this. At this point, this of being the digital interface between human and digital, anything that the human does or somebody wants to do with the human goes through our interface. So all advertising must first come through your digital assistant to make sure there's the right ad for you. In fact, it will be proactively. Or all shopping happens here, all bookings happen here. We're the choke point for everything. And so I think our sort of business model is to take all the services that exist today on the internet and say, you are data providers and utility providers, but we are sort of the one app to rule them all, the human app.
Gotcha. Very interesting. So I think that one of the things that obviously with everything that's happening, AI in terms of capabilities, I'm seeing broadly just a vast array of responses from over exuberance on one side, basically assigning more weight to some of the current applications as they are, models as they are, all the way to sort of the opposite end of the spectrum, absolute doomsday scenarios, which some parts of which are obviously worthy of concern. So I guess what I would love to hear was what are you most excited about AI in general right now? And as a complement, what are you most concerned about?
There's so much cool stuff going on. It's hard to choose. Most excited? Look, I think this AI's been around. I mean, AI is everywhere. People don't think about this. Most of Google is machine learned. Rankings and algorithms. When you do Google search, that's all AI driven. Again, AI itself, obviously a very ambiguous term, but the thing that I'm excited about is that we, regular consumers, humans, now have the ability to, more deeply and in many more ways, interface with these models that now, there's a tremendous amount of innovation has been done in being able to create these models. We benefited from, exponential increase in compute. So we now have the ability to take data and parse it and make it ultra atomic and intelligent and ranked and all of that. And now we have the capabilities to start to wield it. And so if any of you haven't played with Mid-Journey, for example, you should, it's amazing. I'm not going to explain to you how to do it, you can Google it, but that should blow your mind if any of you haven't played around with ChatGPT. Again, today the interface is this text box, which I think is absolutely the wrong interface for it, but it's amazing what it can do. So I'm extraordinarily excited about this next phase of computing. Like it's been radically, what we do 5 years from now with information technology, I'm certain is going to look nothing like what we do now. All of it is going to change. I'm certain of that. So that's super exciting. On the other side, whenever we have these kinds of new opportunities for humans to do things, humans make mistakes, either intentionally or unintentionally. And of course, my concern here is that we're giving humans these like crazy new capabilities to say something or push a button or do whatever, and it can have massive consequences.
Yeah,
to our society at large, to the individual humans. Privacy is a piece of it, but in many ways seems almost like the smallest piece of it. Ultimately important, but if somebody steals your identity, that's terrible, but manageable. But if the wrong kind of idea spreads through society, unintentionally or intentionally, that's catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly with the new generative capabilities, where there's been a lot of very justified concern in terms of national security based on the ability of foreign adversaries to create even more sophisticated deepfakes, lots of disinformation. Another concern that comes to mind for me is also the fact that so many of the sort of the underlying foundational models are basically controlled by a very, very small number of huge companies, right? Obviously they have. So, and the fact that models and the data sets themselves, the vast majority are not open. There are some new, just even last night, some models that came out. Stability AI came out with one. There was another. Mosaic ML just released another one. So there's progress in that domain. But I guess I'm also curious about what you think in terms of that sort of intersection between the private industry, government, nonprofits, and academia. What do you see the role of, whether it's regulation or legislation, or do you have any guidance or recommendations around those kinds of important issues? I know that's probably a whole other topic.
There are a few questions.
Yeah.
But let me take, I think, the first one that's super important. So these models, especially like these large language models, where you can engage with them in speech, and these generative models for images and videos coming and all of that. All of these models need to be trained on a data set of available data. And the data that's been available to them is all of the stuff we've published to the web. Some of the stuff we've published, we humans, some of the stuff we've published to the web has been intelligent, professionally written, accurate information that's valuable for a model to learn. Some of the stuff we've published to the web are Reddit comments. If any of you have not been to Reddit, I encourage you to take a few moments, have a couple of drinks first, and embrace yourselves to Reddit. And so these models are learning from inaccurate and potentially crazy, I don't know what the word is, but like just junk information. Now, it's amazing that they can consume all of this information and they can parse it and structure it and be tuned. So these models are trained, it's called unsupervised, they're sort of let loose and grab everything they can grab and get trained on it. And then you have to fine tune them. Using something called reinforcement learning with human feedback. And so humans are involved and now at the final sort of steps of these models of saying, no, please don't say that ever. That's a bad idea. I know you probably learned it on Reddit, but this does not belong in our data set here. So what we need, I think if we were to, and by the way, you may read that these things hallucinate, it's called, They just make things up. Because they are generative models. They're like, hey, it's not a bad idea to take this concept and this concept and this concept and put them all together, and that's a valid response. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And if you're generating art, that's extraordinarily cool, because you can come up with all kinds of amazing permutations you would have never expected before. But if you're using these things for other applications, to be a personal assistant, or military applications, or other applications, you can't have these things hallucinate. And so what we need desperately is more data sets, much better data sets, and this is why I am in agreement with you. That Gretel, I think, is a very important company now in the space to do this. We need the ability to produce more data in order to train these models. And we can get bits of data and then sort of expand on them using synthetic data. Or, again, we can create new ways of getting data that we've never been able to have before, and that is creating interfaces that, for example, with humans, to be able to tease out of humans' mind data that exists and then needs to be properly handled. Regulation has a place, I think, in all of this. Of course, the problem with regulation is that all of that takes time. And by the time you have regulation, especially with information technology accelerating, innovation accelerating exponentially, especially now with these AI systems, it's going to be impossible to, I think, to attempt to even do that. What does that even mean?
Exactly, hard to keep up.
By the time you schedule a meeting, it's already moved on multiple generations.
Exactly. And I know that we're at time. Do we have time for any questions, or do we need to wrap it up at this point?
Question there.
The microphone.
Yeah, if we have time for
And by the way, I will stick around. My flight's not until 8 p.m. And so I'll stick around and happy to answer questions and such.
Great, thank you.
So Dmitry, a couple times you touched on something that's been in my head since ChatGPT kind of came out, which is, there's so much of the internet's content has been generated for marketing purposes, and it's a great way for companies to get the concept that they're working on out there and to teach their customers about it. If ChatGPT is crawling that and then synthesizing it, what's the role for kind of future knowledge, and how will future companies put that knowledge out there and inform their customers?
So when you say what's the role for future companies, meaning will companies be...
Well, how will they do that? How will they do that in the era where we're not as worried about indexed web pages?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question, thanks. I'm going to answer it a little bit sideways, I think, because we can talk afterwards to get into nuance. As I mentioned earlier, it is clear to me that the way that we humans use the internet moving forward is right now about to change radically. And so this concept of I need to type in an address to go to a website and then parse it using my eyes and brain and read it and try to figure out what it means and click on links to go to other sections to get more, that's going away. Meaning the web's still going to be around and you can go there and use it. That's not going to be the way that you're going to be doing things. And so creating web pages is not the future of the way that your company, if it's a company, sort of makes their products available to consumers. If you're a manufacturer of something, you create a product and you have in mind the customer for that product. And today you've got to create all this content, and then you've got to somehow get the customer to come to you and read your web page and hear your value proposition. And so you oftentimes use advertising. And we all know that advertising is all about targeting. And targeting is hard. And so most advertising dollars are wasted because you're showing your ad to the wrong people expressed in the wrong way. We still do it, it's a giant industry, obviously, but it's extremely inefficient. But in this new world, where our minds, again, our mental states are digitized, an advertiser advertisers, manufacturers of something, can simply say, I would like to dial in this specific pattern of states of mind. Those are my customers. And I'd like to present this opportunity to them. That opportunity does not need to be on the open web, just sort of sitting around with SEO and a bunch of dumb ads driving to it. That's the inefficient way, because we didn't have the data. The most important data, like who's all of this made for? Who's AI made for? Who's the web made for? It's made for humans. But the biggest problem right now is that we know all of this information about the world at large, products, blah, 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 but we don't have that last part to the human. If we can solve that, then sort of everything gets short-circuited and changed.
Very interesting. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time.